Alright, the aim of this session is to talk about the structure of a tooth, not the anatomy of dentition as a whole, but a tooth, the parts. So we'll talk about the regions, we'll talk about the different layers, and we'll do a little bit of cellular stuff. I haven't got any histology, because these things are a little bit difficult to slice, I just haven't got any. We'll talk about the functions, we'll talk about the gomphosis, which is a great joint, things like that, alright? We'll also talk about the surfaces, because that's a dental thing. Anatomical terminology of the surfaces of the teeth. That's useful as well. Alright, now as I'm sure you're aware, teeth are generally living cellular things. They're very hard. Mine are a bit stained from drinking too much tea and coffee, but if I didn't drink a lot of tea and coffee, I'd never get everything done. Their main aim is obviously to break up food, to mix that food with saliva, so to begin digestion. They're also important in speech. You move your tongue against your teeth to make sounds. And of course you notice that when people don't have certain teeth, then they sound a little different, don't they? They are vascular, nervous structures, so they have blood vessels going in and out, and they have nerves going in and out, as I'm sure you're well aware. If you haven't had any tooth pain ever, well done, keep it up, keep brushing your teeth. But some parts of the tooth are cellular and can be renewed, and some parts of the teeth are not cellular and cannot be removed. So we'll talk about that a little bit. There are 32 adult teeth. Of course, you know we have two sets of teeth, not talking about that today, but 32 adult teeth, and they are a little different in shape and size. These are particularly big ones, but you get what I mean. The other important thing is that these guys, they interact with the bone in which they sit. So we have mandibular teeth in the mandible and maxillary teeth in the maxilla. And bone is something that responds to forces and stresses really, really well, and it gets stronger and it grows, or it disappears and wears down if it's not used. In fact, it's very common nowadays for us to have too many teeth. So I had some molars removed when I was a kid to make room in my jaw for my wisdom teeth to grow through. And I think from reading around, the reason for that is that nowadays, like the last several thousand years or more, we eat cooked foods which are softer. And because those softer cooked foods don't put so many stresses through the bones, through the teeth, then the bones supporting the teeth are not as big as they used to be when we evolved the bones to fit the teeth. Do you see what I mean? The number of teeth has stayed the same, and the bony parts of our jaws have got smaller, so we now have too many teeth and all the problems that involves. Anywho, okay, so a tooth, big tooth, any tooth. Oh, I've got some down here which come apart actually. A tooth has a crown and a root and a neck in between. So the crown is the bit that's sticking out. That is the crown. The root is the bit that is not sticking out. The root is the bit that's attaching to the bone. So it's covered in periodontium, a whole bunch of connective tissues which anchor the tooth root to the bone, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then we have the neck. So the neck is the bit between the root and the crown. Peasy. The root is also the part of the tooth that allows nerves and blood vessels to go in and out of the tooth, and some teeth have more roots than others. From what you know, what are the nerves and arteries that supply innervation and blood to the teeth? Do you remember? Okay, so we're thinking sensory stuff in terms of the teeth. You know, when you get toothache, it hurts. God, I say the obvious sometimes, don't I? So we're thinking sensory nerve of the face. What is the cranial nerve that is the sensory nerve of the face? Trigeminal nerve, cranial nerve 5, correct, well done. It's got 3 branches. Mandibular branch goes down here, maxillary branch goes up here. So the trigeminal nerve is carrying sensory innervation from the teeth, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute as well. Blood supply then, we have the, I don't know if you know these, we have the superior and inferior alveolar arteries. And as somebody pointed out to me in a previous video, because I did not know this, alveolar refers to the socket, right? They're like the little cup. So that's why they get called alveolar arteries. So inferior alveolar artery and superior alveolar artery, which is why you get so much bleeding when you pull a tooth out. And if they have a rich blood supply, there must be a fair bit of cellular activity going on in there. Okay, so what about the tissues here then? Now these come apart. Now as we were just talking about the root, you can now see what is referred to as the root canal. So the canal is just the space that allows the nerve and blood vessels to enter and leave the root. So the crown is covered by enamel, which looks very white here, and you can whiten to make it look nice and white if you like. It's actually semi-translucent. It's probably the hardest material in the body. Makes sense why that is. It wears away over time, and the cells that made it, the ameloblasts, they aren't around anymore. When the tooth was developing, the ameloblasts were helping lay down the enamel, but after the tooth is developed, they apoptose and they die, which means that as you wear away your enamel, you don't have any ameloblasts to make more enamel, which is why you need to look after your enamel, and the enamel is protecting everything else underneath. The enamel is largely hydroxyapatite. I don't think there's any collagen in it at all, and it's not only hard, but it's brittle, which probably explains why you don't want an entire tooth made of enamel. Underneath it is dentine, and the dentine is also hard, but it's not as brittle, and it is cellular. So in the dentine we have odontoblasts making the dentine. The dentine, as you can see, makes up most of the tooth. It is also very, very tough. It's made up of hydroxyapatite, so it's mineralized, and collagen, and there's this, which is a yellower color. And while the enamel is really good at resisting decay, that's why you brush your teeth, is to slow that decay. Once the decay is worn through the enamel and gets into the dentine decays a lot faster. So that's another reason why you have to look after your enamel. I wish I could like re-enamel my teeth. That would be great. If the dentine is covered by enamel, at the crown, the bit that's sticking out of the gum, the bit that you can see, what covers the dentine down by the root? Well, the root is covered by cementum. So cementum is made by cementoblasts. There's a lot of very common sense naming going on. I like this. So the cementum is the covering of the dentine in the root, and the cementum meets the enamel at the neck. And the cementum is also very hard. It is hydroxyapatite and collagen. The cementum's main job is an attachment site for the periodontal ligament, which is going to anchor the tooth to the bone. But the dentine then is covered. So the dentine is inside. It's covered by cementum, or it's covered by enamel, all the way around in a healthy tooth. All right? Now, inside the dentine, we've got another layer, which we can see on this one, and that's the pulp. So the pulp is the softer part of the tooth. This is where you're finding the blood vessels and the nerves. And actually, this is where the odontoblasts live. This is where the odontoblasts are making more dentine. And in there, you've also got fibroblasts, which are maintaining collagen and that sort of thing. Your classic connective tissue cell. You've got macrophages. I think you've got like lymphocytes and stuff in there as well. So this is very cellular. And that's it. Those are the parts of the tooth and the tissues of the tooth. But don't go away yet. There are two cool things to talk about, plus some more terminology. Now, gingiva. Your gingiva is your gums. Now, the gingiva is cool because this is like your epithelia lining the oral cavity. But the gingiva, the reason it's special is because it's, go and have a look in a mirror later, right? It's tightly stuck to the alveolar bone and to the neck of the tooth. So it's kind of making that seal, right? But that's why it looks different to like the softer epithelial lining to your mouth, which is more mobile. The gingiva is actually stuck to these hard bits. That's good. Now, talking of hard bits, the other thing that's interesting is the gomphosis. Now, gomphosis is one of those lovely anatomical terms that almost makes it feel worthwhile learning anatomy. Gomphos is an ancient Greek word meaning like peg or nail or bolt, which is like what a tooth is, right? See, it's like a peg joint. So the gomphosis is the joint between the root and the alveolar bone. Now what we've got here, it's a fibrous joint, so it's the same sort of class of joint as the fibrous joints in the bones of the skull, allowing no movement or very limited movement. And in the case of the tooth, there's very limited movement. There's a little bit of movement here. Now, as I was describing, the cementum covers the root of the tooth, and the cementum gives an attachment point, an anchoring point for the periodontal ligament. So think of lots of connective tissue fibres running like that away at a bit of an angle between the root of the tooth and the alveolar bone. So between the cementum and the bone, periodontal ligament, loads of collagen. Yes, that gets called like the periodontium, all those connective tissues together. So that joint, then, in there are lots of pressure-sensitive nerve endings. So there's a little bit of movement, a little bit of cushioning for when you bite, so everything's not like totally brittle and going to explode inside your mouth. That would be bad. And because of those pressure receptors, it means that you can moderate how hard you're biting, because you're biting different things, different textures, different hardnesses, that sort of thing, right? You don't break your teeth too easily. So it is a special joint, the gomphosis. It's a fibrous joint, it's a very, very strong joint, but also it has a lot of sensors in there that feed back how much pressure is being applied to the tooth as the tooth is being compressed. And I think that is really, really cool. Teeth are quite interesting. I just wish we could fit them all in our mouths and they didn't decay. Bring back ameloblasts, I say. Surfaces of the tooth. If I put this back together, so the best surfaces, the easiest surfaces, the occlusal surface. When your dentist talks about the occlusal surface, they're talking about the biting surface, right? And they might talk about the incisal surface here, so the front teeth, they bite like that, the incisors, but otherwise occlusal surface is here. Now the surface of the tooth out by the cheek or the lips, so kind of out here, maybe the superficial surface or the lateral surface or the anterior surface, that gets called the vestibular surface, or the facial surface, or the buccal surface, or the labial surface. So buccal means cheek, labial means lips, so those obviously refer to different teeth, but otherwise vestibular or facial. And the teeth on this side, they get called that surface of the teeth. Those surfaces of the teeth are the lingual surfaces because they are next to the tongue, right? Now we've also got to describe the surfaces of the teeth next to adjacent teeth. The mesial surface is closer to the median and adjacent to the next tooth. Do you see what I mean? So the mesial surface is of that tooth is on that side, and of this tooth is on this side, and of this tooth is on this side. Do you see what I mean? So that's the mesial surface, and then the distal surface is on the other side. So it's the side between the teeth, but on the opposite side. So that would be the mesial surface, that would be the distal surface. Mesial, distal, occlusal, lingual, and vestibular. Useful anatomical terms when you're trying to describe where something is on a tooth, like a hole or a decayed bit, right? There you go. I'm sure you already knew a lot about teeth, but hopefully that's brought it all together. So the parts of a tooth, the tissues, bit of the cells, but I haven't got any histology, I'm afraid, and then the surfaces and that gomphosis. Okay? See you guys next week then.